Hi everyone. I would like to talk to you this morning about the mismanagement of Scottish football under many guises. Some say it's because of bigotry, but I don't agree with that. Yes, because of stupidity, but the other extreme is because of the extreme bias um, of simply developing Scottish football talent. Um, Either what we have here is an extreme bias against Scottish football by those in charge of it in the management roles, or it's just extreme stupidity. Because I'll tell you why. Let's look at one of the greatest Scottish football managers of all time, whose name was Jim McLean. He was a religious man. He was a moral man. Now, that man actually managed to beat Real Madrid. His team beat Real Madrid to reach a final. And those that were in charge of Scottish football, even back in the 80s, couldn't even rearrange the fixture list to give him a better chance of winning the final, which meant that he had to play something like 3 games in a week, and his players were so tired that they actually lost the final of a major European competition. Dundee United is such a small club for the American viewers, but this man was very Christian, and he actually always argued about not playing Sunday football. Okay, now that's what I call moral. Okay, now the relegation of Glasgow Rangers to the third division is fair enough. I mean, David Murray mismanaged Glasgow Rangers. Nobody asked questions where the money was coming from. People believed that it was coming from his own business. In fact, he was actually borrowing the money from the banks, and when one of these banks were taken over, then the club were left with a massive debt, probably about 20 to 30, 40 million pounds, which accumulated into something like 80 million pounds by the time Glasgow Rangers were closed as a business last year. But a year on, they managed to keep, I think, 6 of the last players from their squad. The other players breached their contract, but UEFA didn't overrule this. But that's a side issue. What we're talking about is the morality in Scottish football. So people were saying that it was moral to put Rangers into the third division. But in fact, the same thing happened to Livingston. Yes, they were relegated when the rules were put in place, but many clubs were not relegated before this rule was put in effect about probably 5 years ago or so. So when Glasgow Celtic went into administration back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was no such rule for them. And again, basically, Rangers and Celtic are all the clubs in Scotland rely on them for their financial management. I don't hear the clubs readily if they're very moral, very Christian people. I don't actually hear them arguing against the Sky Times where they've got to play matches on a Sunday at 1 o'clock. Now, if they're such great Protestants or such great Catholics, then why don't they ban Sunday football in Scotland if we're so moral? Okay, that's where the hypocrisy is, okay? The fact is it's not moral, and the fact is that every football club in Scotland have an absolute jealousy and hatred for Glasgow Rangers, and that's why Glasgow Rangers are in the third division today. Not because Scottish football or Scottish footballers or those who run Scottish football are moral, it's because they're bigoted and because they're biased, and because even back in the 80s and before that, they actually proved incompetency in running the game in Scotland. And as I said, even Dundee United, who voted against Glasgow Rangers to go down to the third division, even they suffered at the hands of the SPL, that they couldn't rearrange the fixture list for them to win that European final, going back to that time. That's just a few examples, okay, but there are many examples, and I know that the Tartan Army have been very frustrated over the past few managers that there's so many players left out the Scottish team, going all the way back to Duncan Ferguson, one of the great Scottish so-called hitmen, talisman, just able to stand in the penalty box and head it in, or he was also great on the ground as well. But again, he was overlooked, and he decided not to play for Scotland. There's been such a number of players over the years that have mismanaged the Scottish football team. So at least I hope that Gordon Strachan can pick the right players, the best players who are in form. Yes, I've actually met Gordon Strachan before, as I said in one of my other videos, but and I think he's a great little man. I really kind of liked him, when I met him. So I really hope he's got the common sense to pick the best players. But again, this video is about the so-called morality in Scottish football. Who are you kidding? What's actually happening now? Because Rangers are in the third division, we've got now a number of larger clubs in Scotland that are basically struggling to survive, and only Celtic, of course, are thriving now because they're the only club that can actually afford to sign decent players and run the club at a gain, and how foolish it is for, again, those who run Scottish football to ask Rangers' greatest rivals and all their other rivals if it's right to relegate Rangers from the league. They couldn't make that decision themselves. Again, it's spineless, it's idiotic, and they're showing a complete incompetency for running the game in Scotland. And all of us that are coaches, I'm involved in coaches, coaching the game. I've been involved in the game of football, but even from a financial point, what they've actually done makes no logical sense. It's just purely stupid and bigoted, and they really should seriously take a look at themselves and listen to the coaches that are, that know that the game should have probably a 3x16 league or something like that, to that effect, because obviously the number of clubs and the size of the clubs in Scotland are not that many, so they should really look to shorten the league sizes and obviously stop the teams playing each other like 3 or 4 times a season. That's far too much. Everybody knows it's far too much except those who run the game in Scotland, because they are doing it to produce more wealth, so that Rangers and Celtic play these teams at the top more often, so they generate more cash. So it's all about money. So it's not about morality at all. If it really was about morality, then they would stop Sunday football altogether and cancel all these Sky football deals right now, if you're moral in Scotland, that you're running the game. But you're a bunch of hypocrites. So I've said my piece. God bless you.